Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Faulkner. Okay. Commissioner Hinojos Fall. Commissioner Lucero.
Here.
Commissioner Morondo.
Here.
Commissioner Pava. Commissioner Toya. Madam Chair, there is a quorum present.
Thank you. So is Ms. Moore, is Commissioner Toya excused?
Chair Clow, members of the commission, we received notice that he wasn't going to be able to attend tonight due to work commitments.
Thank you. Okay, the next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Pava. Okay, we'll move to the approval of the November 3rd, 2022 minutes. Are there any changes from staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no changes.
I'm sorry, we got to do the approval of the agenda first. Okay, so we'll move to the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
No changes.
Any changes from the commission?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner. Is she on yet?
Yeah, she's not on here.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes, I'm in. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on the motion to approve the agenda.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucero.
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo.
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
I'll abstain since I was not at the meeting.
Oh, this is approval of the agenda.
I'm just jumping ahead like Madam Chair. Let's get this meeting going. Yes, quite certainly. It's the jet lag.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Okay, now we'll move on to the minutes. Are there any changes by staff to the November 3rd, 2022 minutes? Any changes by the commission?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero.
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Commissioner Morondo.
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Abstain.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Okay, next we'll move on to the approval of findings and conclusions, and we'll go case by case. The first is case number 2022-5865, Paseo de Conquistadora subdivision. Are there any changes to the findings of facts and conclusions of law?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero.
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
And next we'll take up both the findings of facts and conclusions of law in case number 2022-5505 and 2022-5506. Matter 5505 is 6350 Airport Road General Plan Amendment, and case number 5506 is 6350 Airport Road rezoning. Are there any changes to those findings and conclusions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Commissioner Lawrence.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
yes,
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
And next we'll move on to case number 2021-4648, 2021-4649, 2021-4650, 2021-4651, 2022-5618. And those all concern the property at 300 or 3600 and 3740 South Meadows. Are there any changes to those findings of facts and conclusions of law?
Motion to approve.
Second.
second,
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
yes,
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero.
Yes, although I wasn't there, but I have reviewed all the materials.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Morondo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Okay, now for new business, we'll move to case number 2022-6012, Caje del Oro Final Development Plan, and case number 2022-6013, Caje del Oro Final Subdivision Plan.
My apologies. Y'all went through those findings of facts quickly. Good evening. I'm Heather Lamboy with Planning and Development Services, and this evening I will be presenting Caja del Oro Final Development Plan, and there is an associated final plat as well. This case you saw, I guess maybe a little over a year ago, with reference to a rezoning and a general plan amendment, as well as a preliminary development plan. So the request is for a development of a phase one of the development. The original preliminary development plan called for development of both sides of Caja del Oro Road on which the site is situated, but the applicant has decided to phase the project. The GIS map has not been updated as of yet. So this reflects the old category for the future land use map. This was approved and amended by the governing body on September 28th. So it was amended from both community commercial and very low density residential to medium density residential. Likewise, on the zoning, there was an approval on September 28th to rezone the site from C2 and R1 to R10. The reason the request for the zoning was to allow for a development plan to be determined by the Planning Commission rather than having rigid setbacks like what would be offered in a typical R6 zone district or what have you, because these are paired homes. They require sort of a special analysis of the setbacks and consideration. So the discussion for the preliminary development plan, the concerns were the setbacks and the height of the buildings, the availability of parking for residents, school capacity, access to parks, planned bike lanes and trails, as well as density and how it would compare to the Agua Fria traditional village. This is located somewhat proximate to the traditional village, but not within the village itself. So this is an introduction of density into an area that currently is vacant and adjacent to 599. There are apartments that are located on the other side, the south side of the Meadows Parkway at that intersection with 599. This is to the north. So the final development plan, which illustrates here, is for the I guess 36 of the 80 dwelling units that would be located south of Caja del Oro Grant Road. So the the map itself is north is to the right instead of, being up and down. And the final development plan, the space is organized and is responding to the concerns that were raised by the Planning Commission. You may recall the conversation about setbacks and the structures and having livable open space for the residents on their own particular lot. So the number of units has been reduced from 88 to 80 for the entire development plan, a portion of which is reflected in this phase one, which is south of the road that bisects the development. There have been 24 guest parking spaces provided adjacent to the park there in phase one. And there's guest parking that has also been included to the north side as well, which will be considered at a later date. There is access to a park within the site itself. There's going to be an amenity and then our planned bike lanes and trails. So there are trail connections to regional trails, as well as the red lines on that graphic illustrate trails planned on site. The landscape plan provides a little additional detail, and I know it's pretty hard to see on this graphic. It's pretty small, but there is a plant playground as well as a picnic shelter and a picnic table for the site. So an access will be provided by that internal street network for all of the properties on this phase one. So Stan Holland has spoken with the applicant. There was a condition that came in late with reference to the sewer manholes and just the technical issues associated with wastewater. And so there's an additional condition that would be added to your packets and to the staff report associated with this project. So, and the condition of approval relates to those technical issues. That's if you have specific questions regarding that, Stan can answer. I'm not very good. I'm not a good engineer. So staff recommends the approval of the project with the resolution of outstanding technical issues, including wastewater, as well as other technical issues prior to recordation and issuance of permits. That concludes my presentation.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Nathan Manzanadas, and I am a member of Jim Siebert and Associates. We're located off of 915 Mercer Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I have a presentation, but Heather did a great job and basically did my presentation for me. I'll run through some things on the final development plan, but we just want to thank staff for a thorough review of the project, and thank you, Heather, for working with us on this one. So as Heather stated, we're if I could share my screen, please. We're here tonight for final development plan and final subdivision plat for phase one. Coming up. Okay, thank you, Maggie. All right, thank you. So we have a vicinity map of the site. As stated, there will be a two-phase development. It'll be, here's another aerial of the site. It shows the proximity to existing, there's this existing fire station in the area that's in the Santa Fe County jurisdiction. There's also an existing park in the area and a community center as well as health clinic. As Heather mentioned, this was recently approved for rezoning for R10 to achieve the design that we're going for in the final development plan that allows us to have attached townhome units. Heather already touched on the phasing. So we've spent a lot of time on this project. We've actually been in front of the Planning Commission a number of times to get this just right. So I think the latest design and final design really achieves what the Planning Commission was asking prior. As Heather stated, there's a lot of trails as well as a lot of internal circulation within the development. All of the yellow lines represented here will be public sidewalks. We also have 2 park areas that we're planning on and a substantial amount of landscaping to the site. Here is, we brought this before the Planning Commission a couple months back this brought us down to 80 lots from 88, but we agree that this new design is nice and will likely be a design that is used later on in other developments. It allows for better walkability. It allows for better access to guests. It also provides better parking for guest parking as well. So one request that we do have, and I'll have Kevin Patton of Pulte kind of go into further detail on this, is we are asking for final plat for phase 1, but we would like to ask the commission to grant us the ability to also start grading for infrastructure installation for the phase 2 portion of the project. The aim is to come in within the new year, fairly early in the new year, and submit for phase 2 final development. So that's a question that we would like to ask of the commission. And if possible, move that into the recommendation and the motion. So these are the proposed renderings of what each unit will look like. As stated, they're attached townhome units, very similar to other product that has been provided by Pulte in the city. And with that, I think I'll stand for questions. Once again, thank you, Heather, for doing a great job in representing this project.
We can, I think, see if there's any clarification questions before we open it to the public, but I have a question. Is it appropriate for us to be dealing with the grading issue on phase 2 if there's no public notice on that issue?
Thank you, Chair Clow and members of the commission. Yeah, it's our contention that because we're only approving phase 1 this evening, that it's a moot point to consider allowing grading of phase 2. If it came to the permit counter, there would be no approval and no allowance to allow grading on phase 2 until that was also approved.
That's what I thought.
Madam
Thanks.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So they could come in for a grading permit if they submit the entire financial guarantee for the whole project. But only under that stipulation.
But we don't need to address it, or we can address it and make that a condition?
Thank you for the clarification. And Madam Chair, if you'd like a little bit more insight on why we're requesting the grading on phase 2, I have Kevin Patton here from Pulte, and he can speak to why we're asking for that.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kevin Patton, 7601 Jefferson Street, Suite 320, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87109. Madam Chair, Commissioners, let me give you just a quick background of my experience, so you know that when I'm talking about what I'm talking, I have some professional experience in my ask before the board. So 1992, graduated from New Mexico State with a bachelor's of science in civil engineering, came to work for Bohan Houston a civil engineering firm in Albuquerque. And for 23 years, I worked on residential subdivisions throughout Albuquerque and Santa Fe. So for most of my professional career, I'm a New Mexico licensed professional engineer. I designed, graded subdivisions throughout, again, Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, and Santa Fe. The request before you is that when we do a design on a subdivision, the engineer's goal is to try to balance the dirt. So what we want to do is try to minimize the impact to the surrounding community by not having to import or export dirt. When you do that, you have to load it in a truck. The truck then is pretty heavy. Dirt weighs a lot. It's the roads. It's an impact on the roads. It's impact on, you're going to, you try to cover those, but you're going to have dust. You're going to lose that. That dirt's got to go somewhere. It's got to go to another site. So if it's not across the street on this particular one, it's going to go somewhere. So it's whether it's in the city of Santa Fe or in the county, they've got to place that export, or if they're going to import it, they've got to take that dirt from someplace and bring it in. So you are disturbing another site, whether it's across the street or if it's somewhere in the city of Santa Fe or the county. Our hope is that we want to try to minimize that impact, try to minimize the carbon footprint that we would have by grading the entire site, keeping those activities within our boundaries. So we minimize the impact to the roads, to extra fuel, to the residents that, where this might be going. And so that's just our request. If for whatever reason, the commission or staff doesn't feel that that's beneficial in any way or disagree with us, we're fine with just grading phase one. We were trying to do what we think is the right thing. But if for whatever reason someone disagrees, we're fine with just keeping it within phase one. We'll look to import or export. It's really hard to try to balance it within a certain phase, because you increase retaining wall heights, and it just doesn't, as far as the grading goes, it doesn't necessarily bode well when you're having to work within a specific phase.
And are you okay with the requirement that you put the bond up for the whole project?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Clarifying questions? Mr. Pava, Commissioner Pava.
So good evening. I have just a couple questions that might be more appropriate from our city staff. Reading through the very lengthy covenants that are proposed for the project, they seem to be very comprehensive. On my experience, and they would be necessary for this kind of a development, this density and design. For example, on page 33 of the covenants, we talk about parking limitations. There's limitations about rooftop HVAC equipment. On page 35, there's prohibitions about garage conversions and whatnot. There's just a couple of examples, but in your reading through these covenants, do you find them to be consistent and supportive of the project? Are there any issues?
Chair Clow, Commissioner Pava, I find it to be consistent with what we try to achieve, both through our architectural standards as well as simple things about people parking in each or over each other's driveways. And that has been an enforcement issue in terms of cars being everywhere. So do really appreciate the addition of parking for guests and the like. So it does cover the things that are necessary with reference to city code, those problems that we find the most.
Thank you, Ms. Lamboy. My experience, having been on a homeowners association in Los Alamos for Chimisa Park many years ago, a very similar kind of a development was the devil is in the administration implementation with a design review board and a board of directors for the association. So that's why I asked. I think it's really important to have these covenants, but there are a lot of restrictions on really things people moving into these really need to understand, especially down the road, what's required. And I guess that's the diligence of the board of directors of the community ultimately. Thank you.
Chair Commissioner Pava, I believe that the Los Solares, those that have been built in Los Solares have similar covenants as well. And they're just starting on their HOA.
Any other clarifying questions by the commission?
Chair Clow, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Smith?
I may be showing my ignorance as a relative newcomer, but if you do the financing and then you do the grade, you do all of the grading, and then for any reason the second phase is not approved, is there a fallback position in terms of fixing of settling the issue on the plot of land across the road?
Chair Clow, Commissioner Smith, with reference, that's one of the reasons that Maggie stated that we prefer everything to be graded by phase. Although Mr. Manzanadas indicated that they would be coming in for phase 2 at the beginning of January. That is one concern that we have, is how long we'll sit there, just as maybe a dust bowl. So it could be within the purview of this commission if you find that it would be okay for them to do one, grading at one time, is to seed the second phase so that there will be grass and the like there, native seed, until which time they develop that site.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to that. And as Jason stated, we will have to put up a letter of credit or a bond. And one of those line items will be re-veg and a contingency for, that type of, if that were to happen, we would plan to re-veg that site accordingly.
Any other questions? If not, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't on the commission when this was presented the last time. This is my first kind of go through understanding what this development is. And I'm just curious as to why some of the maps that were shown on the screen here weren't included in the packet that we've seen. Because it's the first time I'm seeing that, and it's certainly more detailed than what I've seen. Now I'm looking at things like bike trails and different things, and I'd like to see something like that, certainly, but I haven't seen something that I feel like is that at least to that quality, and I just want to hear more about that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Lucero. So a lot of that information was shown during the preliminary plat and development plan application, as well as the rezoning application. One request was to phase. So with those maps came new phasing maps, but all been consistent since day one with the updated trails, setbacks, sidewalks. Those were reviewed by both the Planning Commission and governing body prior. I just think you weren't on the site or on the commission, unfortunately.
All right, I appreciate that. In the future, I'd love to see something like that, just because I'm getting used to it. And I know there's other new commissioners here
Absolutely.
as well. So
yeah.
I'd love to see those maps still to be included in the materials for any time, this development comes through.
Absolutely.
And I have one other question. In regard to the strip of land designated as R1, I was not really familiar with, or I was a little bit confused on that. And I wondered if you could just clarify why that strip of land either is not included in the development, or, what's the intention of that land. And
so Madam Chair,
it seems like an awkward piece of land there.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lucero, there was actually a lot of work that was done in order to create the new rezoning request. There was multiple legal lots of record that had to be proven legal and then consolidated and rezoned. So basically everything within this chunk here, I don't know if you can see my screen, is now zoned as R10. And the remaining bottom half of the development will be C2. So everything within the Caja del Oro phase 1 and 2 is zoned R10 now, to meet the setback and dimensional standards to do this type of design.
And I imagine that strip of land that's R1, is that along that, what is that?
So that would-
Cemeterio, that Camino Cemeterio? Is that what?
Okay, that is actually, oh, Jim, you want to speak to that?
Swear under the perjury that.
I do.
Thank you.
My name's James Siebert. My address 718 Juniper Drive, Santa Fe 87501. Yeah, I'm stepping in because I've been working on this project for the last 2 years now. I know the kind of the complete history of it. The strip that you referred to that's between this property and Camino Cementerio was the owner who put all these lands together is Carlos. And he was unable to simply purchase this from, and he had to deal with like 3 or 4 or 5 different owners in order to assemble this as a package. He was unable to purchase that particular strip of land from the owner that they just simply didn't want to sell.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to comment on this project? Ms. Moore, is there anyone on Zoom?
If there's anyone in the Zoom meeting who would like to speak during the public comment, please raise your hand and I will promote you.
Okay, there appears to be no one on Zoom that has raised their hand. So we will close the public comment section and open this up for commissioners for any comments or other questions. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
And what are you?
Chair, do we need to define the motion?
I think we do. So Commissioner Smith, do you want to, what are you moving?
I'm moving the approval of the two. I can't, I'm just a minute, I've got to go back to my screen and look at there are two numbers.
Yes, okay, there's.
Staff to read.
Matter 2022-6012, which is the Caja de Oro Final Development Plan, and matter 2022-6013, which is Caja de Oro Final Subdivision Plat.
Exactly.
That's what I second as well.
Okay, and you're moving the approval of that for the record, correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I am.
And Commissioner Faulkner seconded motion.
Okay, Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, you're right. We need to address two issues. One is the new condition.
Oh, yep.
No, the question was, Chair Clow, whether what was the resolution on the grading issue?
Right.
And whether the planning commission would want it to be by phase or the entire site.
Right. So we need to back up and do that. Also, there's an additional condition that is not part of the written conditions. Is that correct? And that's a sewer issue, technical sewer issue.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I guess we need to start over.
Or you could just vote on those separately.
Okay, we can vote on those separately. So let's address the issue of the additional condition, which is the technical sewer issue.
And for clarification, what is that, Madam Chair?
It's a good question.
We'll get Heather to,
Can you
on
read
board to
that,
read it
Heather?
back in. Yes.
It was hard to see up there.
Have to relog back in. Okay, the conditions of approval associated with the technical issues with wastewater is one, all PVC pipes shall be identified as SDR 26 PVC. All 8-inch sewer pipes shall have a minimum slope of no less than 0.4%. Show manhole numbers, rim and invert elevations, existing finished grades for the sewer lines and sewer manholes shown in the PNP sheets. Need to know, number 4, you need to show all water and storm line crossings with separation distances of the sewer lines in the P&P sheets. Number 5, all service lines shall be SCH 40 PVC. Number 6, show detail drawing for 6-inch sewer service lines and how they connect to the public 8-inch sewer lines or manholes. Number 7, some city details are not current and will need to be upgraded. Number 8, need detail for VOLL standard detail for the 6-inch line referenced in the sewer line construction notes. 9, need typical section for road details showing water, sewer, storm sewer, and dry utilities locations. And number 10, no sewer manholes shall be less than 4 feet deep if no water lines are located parallel to the sewer lines. And
Thank you.
don't ask me what that means.
It sounds great. Okay. Do we have a motion on that?
Motion to approve the condition.
Second,
Commissioners Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
yes,
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
And now we'll address the, whether the commission will agree that grading can occur on phase 2 with the understanding that the developer will put up a bond for the whole project.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Madam Chair, can I ask for a bit more information from staff? Can we vote on that?
Of course.
I think that I potentially have the same concern that Chair Clow expressed, that I want to make sure, I'm not opposed necessarily to the idea of grading with the financial guarantee provided, but I want to be clear, is the step of grading something that is part of the development plan, which I think we are voting on today for phase 1 and 2? Or is it part of the subdivision plat? And is that the necessary precondition such that we are not voting on that today?
Chair Clow, Commissioner Lawrence, the phase 1 plan is being approved. Grading and grading permits are permitted prior to any type of construction. The preliminary development plan has been approved for phase 2. So they would be coming back for a final development plan to complete that second phase.
So can I clarify? So normally, in order to begin grading on a site, you need to have a final subdivision plan approval for that site. Is that correct? Or is a development plan approval sufficient? I think that's really what my concern is here.
Well, and also, isn't there something about this condition that we can forego a standard of practice because as long as they put in the full bonding capacity? Did I understand that right?
I think, Commissioner Faulkner, my concern is still whether this was properly noticed and whether we as a body are okay acting on it.
Gotcha.
well, isn't that a question?
That's a
Commissioner
question
Lawrence?
for Pat.
Yes.
Sorry. This is only actually approving phase 1. There's an error in the caption. So it's only the final subdivision plat. on the final development plan for phase one. It's not both phases.
Thank
So-
you for that clarification. And I think that then clarifies that since we're not voting on anything in phase two, I at least would be reluctant to say in this meeting that we're granting approval to start grading on a piece of property that's not in front of us at this time.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Madam Chair, we'd like the city engineer to clarify. If she
Yeah.
could,
Do I need to be sworn in?
Dee, are you able to weigh in on this discussion? Bring some clarity for?
Do I have to be sworn in first or?
No.
I'm not sure about the legalities of having the development plan approved, but you can grade a site without having a complete plan for the site. I would think if we have a financial guarantee that we can ensure that if they did just leave it graded and never do anything, that we have money to go back and fix the site. So the financial guarantee, instead of just saying that it would be enough money to reseed the site with just some grasses, it would have to be enough to redo the site as close as possible to what it was previously with some, hills or and significant trees and bushes and things like that. So there would have to be a significant amount of money put in. I had just stated that if they put the entire bond amount for the second phase, that would cover it. Otherwise, they need to come up with a plan and money for each individual thing. I think having all the money required for the second phase would definitely cover anything that we would have to do to fix the problem if they never built on it. So that was my reasoning in saying that they would just have to have a financial guarantee for the entire thing. Otherwise, they need to give us an entire plan for what they're going to do.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Is there anything explicit in the code that would indicate we could not make this decision in the affirmative?
I'm sorry, Chair and Commissioner, are you asking me?
Whoever can answer the question.
I don't think there's anything in the code that states that you couldn't, because you can have a grading permit for a site. There's nothing that I know of in the code that says that we can only require a grading or only issue a grading permit if we have a development plan. I think that we have the leeway to say that they could balance the site out with this grading of the second phase as long as we have assurances of at least money that they can fix in.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are we ready to vote on the motion?
Madam Chair, can I offer a friendly amendment to the motion that in addition to the full financial guarantee provided, that there is a commitment to meet any other city needs for site restoration if it turns out to be necessary, as recorded here in this meeting?
Whoever seconded would need to second the amendment.
Is the amendment approved?
I'll take that as a friendly amendment. I think I made the motion to approve it, so I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
And who seconded?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we'll move to case number 2022-5899, 5200 Beckner Road Development Plan Amendment. Mr. Alvarado.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Chair Cloud, 1 second. It's not going up. We get some IT help. What did I do this time? Okay, wait, I think I got it. I think I got it. I got it. It's always doing another screen, but okay. There we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Members of the commission, tonight we're going to be hearing case 2022-5899. It's located at 5200 Beckner Road, development plan amendment for the owners Via Sendero, and the applicants are Seabird and Associates. The applicant is requesting an amendment to a development plan to incorporate the third phase of the development, which would add 56 units on a 2.5 acre tract. This would be in addition to 276 units that are existing or approved on a 12.4 acre tract. This is the case caption. I just read it off. So off the bat, we'll just say that the staff does recommend approval for this case, subject to conditions of approval and technical corrections as outlined in this report. And then, as you know, one motion will be required for this case, approve or deny the development plan amendment. So quickly for some project background, phase one of the development plan, it's the Via Sendero development plan, but the apartments themselves are called the Cilio Luxury Apartments, was approved on January 23rd, 2022 or 2020, excuse me. And phase one consisted of 252 units and on approximately 11.4 acres. Phase two was approved in a development plan amendment on November 10th, 2021, which consisted of 24 units on 0.99 acres, as well as they added some reconfiguration of the drive aisles and internal circulation. So now they're on to amendment number 2. This would be phase 3. The parcel where the amendment is proposed, or the phase 3 is proposed, was previously owned by the New Mexico Department of Transportation as part of the right-of-way for I-25. When the Diverging Diamond intersection was constructed, the parcel was put on the market as surplus, and the applicant subsequently purchased it and now are proposing to expand their development. So this includes phase 1 and phase 2, but that's what's outlined in the line there. For context, this is phase 3. So what you'd be voting on tonight, it again consists of 2.5 acres with 56 units, maximum of 3 stories or 36 feet. There's 82 surface parking spots, 47 garage, and approximately 33,000 square feet of open space. As you can see, the layout, well, we'll go through to the perspective here in a sec, but let me keep going. So this is the total development. So you can see phase 1, 234 units. That's already been constructed. You can see in the satellite photo there. Phase 2 is that small parcel that has a blue line going through it. And then phase 3 would be the third parcel that has the green line through it. The total development is around 15 acres. It will total 314 units. It has 1 entrance off of Beckner Road, plus 3 additional emergency access points, which you can see in this photo here. These are some perspectives provided by the architects. I'm not sure if they have something more updated for their presentation, but this is what was provided during for the application. This is obviously looking from I-25 north-ish towards the outlet malls. This is a second perspective looking directly north. Those buildings in the foreground are the garages, excuse me, and then there's a second-story building, 2-story building behind that, and then the 3-story buildings in the back. So just to get these things off the table, the applicants have already met a number of these conditions or have agreed to meet them. They've already met the fire prevention conditions. So those are taken care of. And then we had also discussed requiring a noise analysis for this phase 3. It turns out that they have already done a noise analysis for phase 1.
For context, I was not the case planner for phase one. That was several years back, as I just said. So the noise analysis for phase one, we determined that it would be sufficient to cover phase three as long as they adopt the same suggestions from that noise analysis, which mostly are improve window insulation. So the applicant has already agreed to do so. We may need to amend this condition considering how it's written I wrote it sort of specific to be based on our noise ordinance, or we can just consider it met. It depends on what legally needs to be done there. So the one kind of point of contention that we'll have to discuss tonight is condition number 18, which is the trail connection to the diverging diamond trail, as it's known. So both the MPO and land use department have requested that the applicants provide this connection, which is to a trail that's recently been built where the off-ramp used to be for I-25. And if you look on this next page, for regional context, you'll see when that star is the development and the dotted green line is the diverging diamond trail. All of those kind of fat orange lines are proposed future trails, although I think some of them haven't already been built. The dotted green lines are existing trails, and then the blue lines are existing on-street bicycle and multimodal infrastructure. So this is to say that we really think this is a vital connection for regional connectivity. Especially considering the somewhat lack of connectivity for this project, particularly phase three. We do recognize that there are some challenges with this connection, so that's why we've crafted this condition with some caveats, and I'll explain those. The issue is that there's, because it's right against the highway, the trail would need to cross into what's known as the NMDOT access control line. And in order to do so, they have to receive approval from a board at NMDOT. And then they would also need to receive an easement to make that connection. So we do recognize that, but we don't think it alleviates them from our code requirements. And so we're asking to pursue those connections. But if NMDOT does deny those connections, we are willing to accept the secondary recommendation, which the applicants have suggested, and I believe they'll probably show it in their presentation. Just to go through some of our code citations, to be clear, 1475 open space standards is perhaps the most clear citation that this trail connection needs to be made. As you can see, it says to the greatest extent possible, the connection shall provide to public open space in the urban trail system and bicycle paths in such a way that a future connection is facilitated. And then also in 1492, street improvements and design standards, where a trail network exists, access to the trail network must be provided every 500 feet where feasible. Now, actually, we might even be able to ask them to do two trail connections because there's more than 500 feet of frontage there, but we only want one. I think that's reasonable for this project, but that is what the code says. And then another code citation worth looking at is 14815, dedication and development of land, parks, open space, trails, and recreational facilities. Dedication to the city public trail system are required whenever an adopted plan shows a public trail within or along the property line of a parcel. This may or may not apply considering this is not a proposed trail connection in our city plan, but this trail does, it is along the property line, so it may be applicable as well. Finally, I do want to point out also that in our development plan, condition authority for conditions of approval, 1438. There's several conditions that likely apply, including provisions for arrangement of parking and vehicular and pedestrian circulation, namely D, on-site and off-site, sidewalk or utility improvement and maintenance agreements, and other conditions where necessary. And I just want to point out that we are asking for offsite improvements all the time. If you think about road improvements, sidewalk improvements, due to increased traffic load that are not on site, that are in city or public right of way. So this wouldn't really be any different than that as far as that kind of offsite requirement. I also just want to point out a few more citations. I won't read through all of these, but you can see in the general plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the Pedestrian Master Plan, and the Bicycle Master Plan all stress the importance of connectivity and specifically bicycle and pedestrian connections to trails. So we really feel like we have a lot of support for this connection. Finally, I just wanted to point out what exactly we're requesting, just to be clear. We recognize that this is going to be a private gated connection, not open to the public. This is a picture of an existing gate on the property that I took a few days ago. This is the kind of gate that we would expect to be either at the property line or at the trail line, depending on how they wanted to do it. Now, because this is in the NMDOT right of way, it also has to have a fence around it so that people can't access the highway. So we expect that that would have to have a fence around it going between the property and the trail. The connection is not requesting a purchase of land, just an access easement through NMDOT right of way. We're not asking for them to purchase the land. We do want it to be ADA accessible. We understand that there is a slope there that presents some challenges, but I think there's also opportunity to use the natural grade to achieve that. And then, as I said before, if NMDOT does deny this through their processes, then we're willing to accept the secondary connection. And I will add that NMDOT District 5 engineer Javier has already expressed that they would support that. So that's one member of the board that would approve the access line crossing. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant?
Okay, I was just checking about it this morning again. All right, so thank you, Daniel. I think you did a good job of summarizing the project. I have a brief presentation. I don't want to be repetitive, but I do want to give a little bit of history of the project. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So as Daniel stated, this is a project that consists of 3 separate legal lots of record, all of which are designated under a C2 zoning district. The first phase, as stated, is located off of Beckner Road, and that's the bulk of the project. Right now, it's currently built out and 97% occupied. Phase 2 is under construction at the moment. It's a smaller section of that remnant area, but phase 3 is ultimately the remnant track from DOT that's being asked tonight. This will be the 3rd and final phase of the Cielo development, and when it's all said and done, we'll have 314 units. So just to give a little bit more context, we have the 3-story buildings in the back that are approximately 36.5 feet high or 8 feet below the max height limit in C2, which is 45 feet. Then we have our 2-story garage units with below parking, and then 1-story in an uninhabited garage parking structures. Daniel touched on this a little bit, so I don't want to go into too much detail. These are just the renderings shown. This is the 3-story building with in the north of the, and then this is the middle 2-story building. And then we have the 1-story garage units. So as Daniel said, we do have to look at this trail. We have to look at it in a sense where if it's going to be a private trail, who's it going to benefit? Is it only going to benefit the people of Cielo? And we kind of think that if we're going to build a trail, we should build a public trail that will benefit all of the community. As Daniel said, there is a vast trail network in the area. And we see an opportunity to make an improvement that will ultimately utilize all of that trail system in that area off of Beckner Road and Cerritos Road. And that's outside of the NMDOT access control line. So that wouldn't require an additional step from NMDOT that may or may not be approved. So these are the existing conditions right now. There's the multipurpose trail, the Double Diamond Divergent Trail ends about right here. As you can see, there's bike lanes, there's ADA ramps, there's, a lot of trails within this area. We see the problem in this area and we want to solve it. So this is what we're proposing to do. We're going to extend this multi-purpose trail here, which is adjacent to the entry of the Fashion Outlet Mall. You'll have a multi-purpose trail here that can be accessed on the sidewalk or could continue onto the bike lane to the vias, to the Los Solares Trail Network and the Beckner Road Network. So right here, it gives a better understanding of what we're actually proposing here. So we'll extend this trail. The orange line here shows where the multi-purpose trail, which can be accessed here. And then you can also choose to continue onto the bike path or sidewalk. We feel like this is a vital connection and we're willing to make it, So we think that would be a better use of a trail to the community rather than a private gated trail to a gated community that the public ultimately can't access. And with that, I thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Joseph Carnes, and he will go into a little bit more detail on the trail itself. And thank you.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Chair Cloud, members of the commission, my name is Joseph Carnes, Summer Carnes and Associates, 125 Lincoln, Santa Fe. As Nathan just described, our clients who are present here tonight from Teakin and Associates appreciate and share staff's desire to increase trail connectivity in the vicinity of the project site. As Nathan explained, the proposal to connect the trail, fill that existing gap that exists on Beckner Road, is a voluntary proposal. Our position is, and the reason why I'm here tonight, is that staff's proposed condition exceeds the city's authority, and I'll explain how and why. In short, what staff is requesting is that the applicants purchase an interest in property outside of the project site, specifically an easement that Mr. Alvarado just mentioned, and also build a trail on that off-site land that's owned by NMDOT. They want us to purchase land outside of our project site. Mr. Alvarado cited a number of plans and policies relating to trail connections in general. And I'll start by pointing out, when he speaks of the general plan, the pedestrian master plan, and plans, they set policies. As you well know, the city does not regulate based on policies. The city regulates based on Chapter 14. Chapter 14 implements the policies set forth in the general plan and the other plans. So what we need to do is look to Chapter 14 for authority to require this acquisition of offsite property interests and construction of the offsite trail. I was glad to see that Mr. Alvarado mentioned section 14.815. It was not in his staff report, but he did mention it. I have a copy of that section here. It's titled Dedication and Development of Land for Parks, Open Space, Trails, and Recreation Facilities. Right in the title, it talks about dedication. Where do you dedicate? You dedicate on your property. The second purpose under section A2 of section 14.815 states, these regulations provide standards for the dedication of land or easements to the city to assist in implementing the city's parks, open space, trails, and recreation master plan. It speaks only of dedication. And the rubber hits the road with subsection D2. It states the title of section D is public trail dedication requirements. And subsection 1 states dedications to the city for public trails are required wherever an adopted plan shows a public trail within or along the property line of a parcel to which this section 14.815 applies. Dedication of land. You saw in the previous project, what was the applicant doing? They were dedicating parkland and trails within the project site. If the city council wanted to go so far as to obligate a property owner to purchase property outside or an interest in property outside of their project site, they would have said so. Where would they have said it? In this exact section. This is the section that addresses dedication and development of land for parks, open space, trails, and recreation facilities. There is nothing in this section, and I have a copy if staff or council would like to review it, but there is no provision in the city code obligating a property owner to go acquire property off-site to build trails or to dedicate land for trails. Mr. Alvarado spoke of off-site improvements. Absolutely. He was speaking specifically of public streets. It's quite often that you are obligated to improve the street network. That's on city property. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a situation where I haven't seen the city ever do this, to require somebody, an applicant, to buy an adjoining piece of property in order to connect to a trail that does not run within or along the property line. Along doesn't mean, oh, it's over there. This trail is a couple hundred feet from from the western edge of this property. It's not along it by any stretch of the imagination. And if this was the way the city regulated development, there would be no end to the havoc it would cause for project applicants. What happens when the next door neighbor doesn't want to sell? You had a question in the previous case about that area zoned R1 next to the project site. Why was that not part of that project? Because the owner didn't want to sell. Again, it's not in your code. This commission in this city regulates based on its code, and there is no section that's been identified that states an applicant has to go out and buy an offsite property interest. So where does that leave us? As Mr. Manzanadas explained, we want to provide valuable offsite trail connections. We're willing to do that. And he described the alternative for connection and filling in the gap on Beckner. So our request is that you approve the application and delete the recommended condition and approve the project with the voluntary trail connection that Mr. Manzanadas described. In the alternative, if you're not prepared to do that, we ask that you approve the project with the condition. And in such case, we're going to delete, I've talked with my client about this, we will delete that connection on Beckner. It's a voluntary action on the applicant's part, and they're not prepared to invest and spend money on in a situation where they're being compelled to do something that we don't believe is within the purview of the city. And in that case, we'll have no choice but to appeal this, the approval to, or denial if you deny, but appeal to the city council. So that's where we stand. We would much rather improve an existing gap in the city's trail system to the benefit of both the public and the residents of the project, rather than spending time and money on an appeal in a situation where there's been overreach in imposing a condition that's not supported by the city code. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
I have a question. I don't see in this report that the city is requiring the applicant to purchase the land. The city is only asking that the applicant apply to the New Mexico Department of Transportation for access, meaning that, and I don't even think it's an easement because it's basically public land anyway. So they're just looking for probably like an access permit. So I'm not understanding why you're thinking that the city is requiring you to purchase the land.
I didn't, Chair Clow, I didn't say that they're asking to purchase the land. It's an interest in property. As Mr. Alvarado accurately described, I think it would be an easement. But in any event, the anti-donation clause prohibits a public agency from donating something of value to a private party. I believe that there would need to be an appraisal of the interest and payment for the fair market value of the interest that needs to be acquired, whether it's fee purchase or an easement or some sort of access allowance. NMDOT would be charging my client. And more importantly, yes, it happens to be a public agency who owns the property here next door, but what staff is advocating would be applicable in any situation,
But
whether
Mike,
or not it was a private.
I don't think that the city is requiring you, and we could get clarification from the city, to purchase an easement, to purchase the access. They're only requesting that you obtain permission to be able to access the trail through their property. So I'm not seeing, I mean, and if that's correct, then we could make it a condition that you, if everyone else thinks it's appropriate, that the applicant needs to comply with this condition only if they don't have to put out any money for the access.
Correct. Chair Clow,
Yes.
commissioners. We are not asking the applicant to purchase anything. We're simply asking them to apply to MMDOT for this access to be able to create this path from their property to the trail for the benefit of their residents, essentially. So, yeah, there's no, and if you would like, you can put in the condition, add a section that says if NMDOT requires funds for this access, that they, it's not necessary. They can do the alternate. But the way that the condition is written, it's just to apply to an NMDOT for this access.
Madam Chair, can I offer some insights? I would offer that the process the city is requesting of the applicant with NMDOT will be a very lengthy process. And the applicant is correct in that it will be a process that they have to go through the Attorney General and some other things because of the anti-donation clause in the Constitution. And so in fairness to the developer, this is not as cut and dry as perhaps staff, well-meaning, believes that it is. This will be a lengthy process for the developer and it will be cumbersome.
Yes, please.
If you don't mind. So, yeah. Thank you, Chair Clow. And I just wanted to clarify a few things. I did bring up a right-of-way dedication review checklist, which is what our MPO aid manager director, Arikani, believes is what they would have to apply for this dedication. So I may have been incorrectly describing it as an easement, and I apologize. I'm not a land use lawyer, but this is what the process would be. And if you can see this here, there's a title review, there's a survey review, and there's I believe a fee to apply, but it's not like a purchase per se. But again, I'm not an expert on that part of it particularly, but I'm not sure if they need to go through the Attorney General's office and all that, because it's essentially like dedicating a driveway right of way or something like that. It's an access easement. It's not a land donation per se.
If I may, I would also, I do a lot of stuff at the state level in my career as a lobbyist. And I will tell you that this process that you're asking them to go through is not a simple matter of checking things off of a list. each one of those items will take a lengthy period of time to process. It could conceivably set the project back 90 to 120 days, if not longer. And it may go to the Attorney General. It just depends on what the staff at NMDOT interprets to be anti-constitutional, like against the anti-donation clause. And so that's that they have a reasonable concern about this process. And I totally understand staff's position, like this feels like it would be a good idea. But I will tell you, it will be cumbersome for the developer in almost an unfair way, without them having the lead time to start the process of trying to get the easement. I think they're probably gearing up to start the project or at least move to the next phase of the project. And this could conceivably set them back by 90 to 120 days, if not longer. Just from my experience working with the state, and nothing against the state, but it is a cumbersome process.
But it seems to me if if the New Mexico Department of Transportation says no, then there's a backup, and the backup is that they do what they're asking to do now. So it seems to me that they can start their project at the same time before and not wait for a response from the New Mexico Department of Transportation. They don't get the response, then they can do the backup project, which is on the Beckner Road continuation. I mean, there's no desire, I think, on anyone's part to hold up the project waiting for New Mexico Department of Transportation to have time to address this. But I think that the project can proceed and they do one or the other.
Well, so the problem is, Madam Chair, is we can't say this is a condition we're requiring. And if it doesn't work, then we can do this other option, because there's like a fail switch mechanism that you're offering, which is that if the NMDOT says no, then you have this backup. They have to wait for NMDOT to say no, and that can it's the same as waiting for them to say yes. It's a cumbersome process. And so that, to me, it doesn't feel like a fair option for the developer, not at this point in the process. It will be cumbersome. It's not an easy process. I've actually represented clients who have tried to do these very things, and it is a lengthy process. And so it doesn't feel right to me to say, well, if the state says no, then you can do this other thing. That will still lengthen the process for the developer, because they have to wait for the state to say no. And that takes as much time as the state saying yes.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Carnes, you have a comment?
Yes, following up on the process question, I'm reading here an email from Randy Estrada, the property management agent for NMDOT. Good morning, Nathan. Please see a brief outline of the right-of-way use process below. Approval from district to move forward with the following steps: internal NMDOT review through multiple departments, traffic, environment, legal, etc. FHWA approval, Federal Highway Administration approval. It's number 2. And then number 3, responding to a question that came up earlier, if all approvals are met, an appraisal would be required to find the current market value that would be used for annual rental rate. That's coming from NMDOT. Again, following the anti-donation clause, they can't give away a property interest.
Nope.
And 2 more, D, a right-of-way use agreement would be drafted with rental rate and reviewed by the Department of Legal Counsel. And finally, Access Control Committee approval would be needed before the final agreement was sent out for signatures. So that's the process. Again, this issue is not an NMDOT issue. This is an issue of the city code, and the section that fully addresses.
Mr. Carnes, we've heard your argument. We don't need argument
Okay.
again. We're asking for clarifications.
Okay, well, I'm
We don't
just
need your
saying,
argument
it
again.
doesn't depend on NMDOT or a private owner. The situation is it's beyond the city's power. It will be set forth in the code. That's my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments before or questions before we, yes, okay. Commissioner Faulkner, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like some more clarification on what you're describing as your voluntary trail connection. My biggest question, I think, is do you have control of that land now? Is this land that you own? How would that potentially happen? And what would that include in order to make that come into being?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lawrence. So we did take a lot of time meeting with DOT and having some discussions with them. And one of the biggest concerns was the access control line break. And we also met with DOT and they stated that the portion that we want to upgrade along Beckner and Cerrillos is actually within the city's right of way and outside of the access control line. So it would be as simple as working with the city, building it to city spec, and then donating it to the city.
So it would be trail construction on city property done and then dedicated to the city after completion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lawrence, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarification I needed. No further
Madam Chair, I have a question as well.
Hold on. I have a question. Does the city agree with that statement that this is city land?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Clow. Yeah, I believe it is the Beckner connection there that they're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Faulkner, Commissioner Pava had his hand raised before you.
No problem. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if Commissioner Faulkner would like to pursue her questioning, I'll defer my time until she's done.
Are you moving to another topic?
I'm saying that if Commissioner Faulkner would like to speak, I'll speak after.
Okay, that's fine.
The question I have is, so the option that the city has provided would be a gated private entrance option where the developer is offering an option that will be open to the public. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Faulkner, that is correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner. In listening to this and reviewing the plans, I would like to ask of our staff, all things considered, the proposals to have the access directly from the development through NMDOT land versus what the applicant is proposing. Is there really any difference?
Chair Clow, Commissioner Pava, I believe there is because we're thinking about the long term of this development. Talking about approximately 500 people living in this development for the next 50 years. And this connection will allow them to access a growing network of trails directly from their apartment, not having to take a really roundabout way onto the road, onto a sidewalk. By the way, this is not a bike path, it's a bike lane on the road, and they have to cross the road to come back around on a bike. It's not nearly as easy as just walking out your apartment, going down to the corner. And also, I think the city, this is obviously an oversight, this missing piece of sidewalk here. The city we should plan to do this on our own. And I don't think we should be relying on a private sector to do that portion of connection. Whereas this is our only opportunity to make this connection with the private development. Whereas the secondary connection is a connection that the city should make in the future, but we have other opportunities to finish that.
Can you put up a visual showing what the path would be from the development going on this route to access the trail?
Second. So, I think I'm following your question here. Let me see if there's a good, this is probably the easiest way to look at this. Can you see my cursor? So the connection that we're recommending is here, in the corner of phase 3. Ideally it would be a direct connection here. We recognize that there's a grade change, so more likely it would have to be something like this across the grade. What they're proposing is all the way over here in the corner. And, okay, a pedestrian. So if say you're over here, live in this apartment, that means you have to walk all the way out here. I think they actually have a trail here. So maybe they could do this all the way over here and then back down here to access this trail. Whereas we just want them to go right here. And if you're on a bike over here, all the way through here, have to cross an unprotected crossing on a on-street bike lane, cross at the crosswalk, then you can get on the trail. So it's much less convenient. As somebody who walks and bikes everywhere, I can tell you, this is something that would be very frustrating if I lived in this corner. And just for example, I've seen apartments like this, and what ends up happening is people find ways. They'll jump over the fence, they'll cut through the fence, they'll make desire paths over to this place because it doesn't make any sense that there's not a connection. And I understand there's a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, but I don't believe that the code exempts the applicants from our code requirements based on bureaucratic hurdles. And we've tried to craft a condition that allows them to continue with their development, with parallel track with this approval. And if it gets approved, then great. If it doesn't, we move on to the next option. Then that's our position.
I have a question. So in your recommendations, when do you say that they need to have this prior to them recording the development plan amendment? So what do they have to do prior to recording? I mean, what is the timeline on this?
Yeah, Chair Clow. As we see a lot of variation from when we approve a development plan to when we sign the Mylars and we get it recorded by at the Santa Fe County. So that can be 6 months, that can be 12 months, that can be 2 years. We have the approvals are for 3 years for a development plan approval. So they have that long to basically address all the conditions of approval and, kind of bring their set to the city.
But they can't begin work until the development plan is recorded?
They couldn't come and get permits. Yeah, that's kind of like their last step, and then they can come and get permits. So we see a variation of how long that takes, and it's generally up to the applicant.
And could this be that they could record the development plan before they know whether the apartment, which alternative they're going to do?
Claudia, the way that we wrote the condition is that, here, I'll just read it again. So, so condition 18 is coordinate with NMDOT on an ADA accessible trail connection from the property to the adjacent multi-use diverging diamond trail, including but not limited to submitting a request to the NMDOT Access Control Committee, an NMDOT right-of-way dedication request, and establishing a right-of-way agreement. If NMDOT approves the request, the trail connection shall be added to the development plan. NMDOT denies the request, an alternative improvement to provide trail connection shall be determined by the city that will improve multimodal connectivity to the project site. The connection may be private, fenced, and gated as determined necessary by NMDOT and the property owners.
So
and this
all they would need to do is just make application to
Correct.
coordinate, to begin the coordination and the application.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And we would be, more than willing to, participate in that with NMDOT and, facilitate that process. And we currently have it prior to recordation of the development plan amendment.
Okay. Any other questions from the
I have a
commission?
question.
Commissioner Faulkner.
So I'm feeling sick, so I'm not like firing all my pistons right now. So does approval from NMDOT or denial from NMDOT, is that something that can they move on to the development plan with to the final phase without that, or do they need approval or denial from NMDOT?
No, I think what was just said is they just need to make application to the New Mexico Department of Transportation, and then the development plan can be filed and they can move on to permitting.
Is that staff? Is that accurate?
Jason?
Nothing against Madam Chair. She's very brilliant, but I'm just crossing my T's and
Madam
dotting
Chair,
my
that's
I's.
accurate.
You're not here, so you can't see them shaking their heads.
Okay, good.
It's not
I probably
that I'm
wouldn't see it
brilliant,
anyway.
just so I can see them shaking their heads.
Yeah, okay, so approval or denial is not required. You just want them to apply.
Yes.
So then
Yes, I
what,
understand.
this condition is like a moot point to me. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would you require them to apply if the outcome of the application doesn't matter?
Sorry, Chair Clow. I think we're just acknowledging that we can't presume to know the outcome of the application and we have, I know the applicant has reached out to NMDOT and we have reached out to NMDOT, and I know Eric Ani wanted to be here tonight, but he was not feeling well. But he also, works regularly with NMDOT. I used to work at NMDOT and, they have expressed, their support for this type of connection. I think the existence of the diverging diamond trail is a real kind of feather in the cap for NMDOT. So I think that they are, open to, making connections to this trail. And I think it's, as Daniel stated, with over 500 people living here, for the next several decades, I think it is a worthwhile process to undertake if the connection can be made.
And what would be the cost? So there's an appraisal that's necessary. There's fees that are necessary. I'm trying to wrap my head around why this condition is here, because if the outcome isn't required for them to move on to the next process, the developer will basically be doing a lot of work and maybe paying some fees in anticipation of an outcome that really doesn't have any standing at the end of the day, right? So the developers.
Sorry, Chair Clow, Commissioner Faulkner. I think what we're saying, and again, we are saying that we would like to see, some outcome, whether approval or denial prior to recording the development plan amendment. I mean, that's how it reads.
Right. So that's my concern.
Yeah. And so if NMDOT says, no, we're not going to move forward with that, or, we determine that it's not feasible, then we will, move forward with recordation.
Right. So that's my concern, is the process at NMDOT can take a long time.
Absolutely.
And so we're requiring something of the developer that could become cumbersome. And that's the part that I'm like, I'm not sure if, like, that's what's weighing on me, is I have represented clients in a similar situation, and it is not as wham bam as it's being described. It is a lengthy process. Any one of those checklist items can take 30 to 60 days, just one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Smith.
let me just see if I can, if I'm understanding this. What I'm hearing, the staff, I think Commissioner Faulkner is raising a legitimate issue. Having said that, what I've understood the staff to be saying is that because the rest of the plan does not hinge on whether we go plan the first approach or the second approach, that they merely have to apply for the first approach and they can then proceed with the rest of the plan. The development permit is for 3 years, or the plan approval, however we say that. And so before the 3rd year is up, the Department of NMDOT will have either said yes or no. And if they say no, the developer will have moved with the city to Plan B, which is the less desirable, but would be the only available plan. So there, I don't hear a contingent potential that would derail the project based on what NMDOT does or doesn't do.
The only concern I have is that staff.
Commissioner, that was a question. It may not have sounded like one, but
Okay.
I'm trying to ask the staff whether or not there is, am I right? There isn't a penalty here. And there isn't a block to the rest of the project once the plan is approved, the overall development plan.
Chair Clow, Commissioner Smith. Yeah, I believe your summary there is correct. We're not going to block or prevent this development based on the outcome of NMDOT's access board decision.
And I think, but I think an added question is, they can go ahead and begin permitting while they're waiting for the Department of, New Mexico Department of Transportation to make a decision. The answer is yes, then they'll proceed with that construction. If the answer is no, then they'll proceed with the construction on Beckner. And if the commission wants to proceed that way, then whoever moves the motion can really clarify that there's nothing holding up the permitting. We're not going to sit here and wait for the Department of Transportation to address and decide this before permitting is allowed. So I think that that's clear, and we could probably move on.
I just want to make sure that that if the developer wants to move faster than 3 years, that the kind of the boundaries that are set for the developer are clear, and that if the developer wants to build that part of the development before the 3-year mark, that waiting for NMDOT is not going to hold up that part of the development. And what I heard from Maggie was that we would like to get an answer from the NMDOT before we move on to the next phase of approval.
No, it's not. And if the commission wants to proceed with this, whoever makes the motion can make it really clear that no one is waiting for DOT before permitting is allowed. The only thing that needs to be done is an application.
Yeah, and see, this just seems arbitrary. Like this, it seems off to me. Like if we're putting condition in.
Commissioner Faulkner, we haven't even done public comment yet. So I'm trying to move this along. I'm going to let Mr. Carnes make one hopefully informative statement and not an argumentative statement. And then we're going to maybe open this up to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Clow, members of the commission. I'll put on my alternate hat. I spoke with my client, and so you spoke about permitting, not having the permitting being held up. So long as the applicant is not held up from getting permits, building the structures and getting COs. Because we don't want, if we have the buildings built, we don't want to hold off on COs pending NMDOT. So I think the appropriate thing to do to assure that one way or the other, and they're willing to either do the NMDOT trail, or if we get denied, do the Beckner trail connection, so long as the condition in the motion is stated that the reckoning day is the final approval or sign off on the project, so that they're able to serve the city by providing, COs and getting people into these units. So we need to decouple the application. We're certainly willing to make the application within the time period, but then it's out of our hands. So the project goes in the normal course, and it's still hanging over our heads. And however NMDOT decides, it triggers whether we build that trail connection or shift to the one on Beckner. Thank you.
And city's saying fine. They're shaking their heads. So I think we can move on from this one. And Commissioner Pava, you have a question?
Totally unrelated. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is totally unrelated to trails. I'd like to ask of the applicant, given the color palette of the existing buildings and the general sentiment around Santa Fe that it is indeed an eyesore, are you prepared to maybe use a different color palette, more compatible with everything else in the southern entrance on to Santa Fe, given that we're a city that values our unique setting and architectural distinctions? Not that this is stipulated by ordinance, but public sentiment. I'm looking at Mr. Alvarado's comments that what did you say here? It's compatible. I get that. So my question basically is what I just asked. Instead of the grays and the whites and the colors of those existing buildings, given that the massing stays the same, what about a different color palette for at least this to hide what's already there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pava, we have, just Daniel stated, it's consistent with phases 1 and 2, and it meets the city code requirements. I mean, I think they're going to maintain the color scheme that's in 1 and 2.
Thank you for stating it for the record. I'm glad that we have a team coming up with the development code changes to address situations like this. Yes, it did meet the numerical value for approval. Santa Fe, parts of Santa Fe are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, if I'm not mistaken. I just was gone for a month and I traveled across the Eastern Mediterranean to great cities, of which we claim to be one. In every single one of those cities, there's an architectural uniformity, conformity, and beauty that we claim to have. In every one of those cities, with few exceptions, there's also an eyesore that's for one reason, or you look at it and you say, how did that get built that way? And I would say that this qualifies, for the record. I'm not against the project, but I have to say that I would agree with many people in this community that we need to do a better job when we update the code so that this sort of thing cannot happen. That's all I have to say.
Okay, with that, we'll open this up to public comment. So if there's anyone here from the public who would like to speak, please do so now. There appears to be no one in the audience. Is there anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Clow, I do have one individual, Adam Johnson, who's raised their hand. If anyone else is on Zoom that would like to speak, please raise your hand and we'll call on you in order. Adam, I will promote you to panelist. Please state your name and address for the record and be sworn in before you give your comments. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah. Again, please state your name and address for the record and be sworn in. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Johnson, 121 Arroyo Hondo Trail, 87508.
Thank you. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm the director of the Old Santa Fe Association. And wow, I strongly recommend that you do not approve another phase of this apartment complex unless the developer makes a radical departure from the black and white boxes that have already been built. Among my membership, the Cielo luxury apartments next to the outlet malls have remarkably surpassed Capitol Flats as the single biggest eyesore in all of Santa Fe. The current Cielo apartments make the outlet malls architecture look like an exemplary representation of the Santa Fe style, which ironically, this new development is going to hide. So cheers to Commissioner Pava for making this point. The apartments are garish, could not be more out of place in Santa Fe and completely mar the visual entrance to our city. We need more housing in Santa Fe. It would be one thing if these were affordable units, but these apartments are not affordable. As of 10 minutes ago, a 1-bedroom, 708 square foot apartment runs $1,800 a month. We want handsome entrances to Santa Fe, entryways that allude to Santa Fe's unique charm and distinctive architectural styles. The built Cielo units absolutely ruin the view sheds north, south, east, and west. They aren't set back. They lack landscaping that hides the stark black and white and gray against the desert landscape, and they fly literally in the face of good design. They aren't affordable to boot. So, and with regard to the conversation that you all have been having extensively before this, they don't even make the connections that are reasonable and represent good design and a benefit to the community. I encourage you not to be swayed by Mr. Carnes's threats of appeal to City Council. We at OSFA would welcome the opportunity to debate the merits of Cielo Flats and its contributions to Santa Fe in front of the council. And I do want to thank staff, particularly Mr. Alvarado, for his comments about connections and for advocating for intelligent trail planning. Why are we letting developers who build only market rate, quote unquote, luxury apartments build whatever they like? They aren't even playing ball on trail connections, which are a civic benefit. Santa Fe has a unique architectural heritage, and I know that those in districts 3 and 4 want their neighborhoods too to represent the distinctive character of our town. So OSFA strongly disapproves of this project, excuse me. Thank you, and apologies for children in the background. Thank you.
No one else on Zoom? Okay, at this point, we'll close public comment, and I'll open this back up for comments and questions from the commissioners.
Madam Chair?
Faulkner.
Okay.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Commissioner
And
Smith
then
can go
Commissioner
first.
Smith.
Commissioner Smith can go first. That's fine.
I wanted to go back to the comments just made and the comment made by Commissioner Pava before that. Is it in fact the case that there is no, there's no standing for us or no reason or regulatory requirement for us to ask for a different design or color? And is color not part of the design?
Yep.
Commissioner, you would like me to answer that? Sure.
Someone from staff, yes. You are.
That was a question for staff, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Clow, Commissioner Smith, give me 1 second. I was going to bring up the code for you. But as Nathan mentioned, it does meet the architectural points checklist, although it does get a deduction for the color scheme because it's not an earth tone. However, the way it's structured, they still met the overall points structure. So we can't require a color change based on the architectural points checklist. However, I will just point to the development plan conditions section. Let's see if it's going to come up here for me. Which I believe does include elements of design that I think would be up to the commission to decide if it's applicable. Let's see. Gosh, it's hard to read.
Can you read it for us, please?
Yeah, sorry, now I can't read it. Let's see. I might just put it back on my screen so I can read it. I'm sorry. Just can't see that. One moment. Okay, this is development plan 1438, going down to the approval criteria and conditions, which is D, and then section 2. Conditions include, let's see. I don't want to read all of them. It's kind of long. I could have sworn there was a design.
And you'll just read the first part where it says the planning commission may.
The planning commission may specify conditions of approval that are necessary to accomplish the proper development of the area and to implement the policies of the general plan, including And you want me to read all of them?
No, just read the ones that would apply. Thanks.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, let's see. These pages. Sorry, I'm doing this a little bit on the fly. I'm reading this again and I'm not finding specifically what I was looking for. You can do conditions on fences, walls, and landscaping, arrangement of buildings, other conditions necessary to address unusual site conditions. Maybe there isn't a design section. I'm sorry.
Would other conditions, that last one you read, would that be something that's applicable? This is probably a question for the attorney.
Well, I guess the one that it could apply is the last one. Any other appropriate conditions and safeguard in conformity with Chapter 14 and provisions of other chapters of Santa Fe Code that regulate development and use of land. Conditions may be imposed. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that, Pat, does that give us some wiggle room?
Chair Clow, Commissioner Faulkner, sadly, perhaps, as regards to development plans, the commission does not have much sway over design. That is not really contemplated in this section. And there have been previous cases where the commission has attempted to do so and has been overturned by the governing body. So in these cases, as regards development plans, design is not really an issue as long as they meet the checklist.
Well, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Smith.
I would respectfully say that if the governing body wants to overturn us on a question of taste, that's their privilege and power.
Agreed.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
There have been previous cases where we've discussed this. In fact, I brought up this exact section on a case last year when I first started. And when we were talking about architecture styles, and we did not, the commission decided that they cannot take that into consideration as a condition.
Madam Chair. Go ahead, Peter.
There's a precedent.
There may be, but there's a new commission as well. And so I don't want to sound like the current Supreme Court, but this is not a 50-year-old value that is entrenched. And with all due respect, it strikes me that as we rethink some of the rules and regulations, which is happening in several aspects of how we review proposals, being able to begin to describe the concern about some of the existing omissions in the regulatory structure, or however we refer to it, I think it's not a bad thing. And as I said, if the governing body wants to approve another number of black and white and gray buildings, they'll do so. But they should do so.
Commissioner Smith, my concern is that we would be doing something that the assistant city attorney is recommending that we not do because we don't have the authority to do it. And I don't necessarily like to step out of place and do things that we don't have the authority to do, even though it's too bad we don't have the authority to do it. But I, for one, don't think that that's fair to applicants for us not to follow the rules.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Commissioner Faulkner.
Is there anything in the code that dictates that we cannot make a recommendation of this kind? That's number one. That's for staff. The second question I have is for the developer. Why is the black and white thing a non-negotiable? Like, is it not possible that you could move to a different color scheme? Because it's clearly what the community wants. It's clear, like, I'm not sure why that's a non-negotiable for the developer. So if we can unpack my questions for staff, is there anything in the code that says we cannot make these recommendations? And then for the developer, I would like an answer to why the color scheme is a non-negotiable.
So Patricia can answer that, or?
Yeah, Chair Clow, in the section D of the development plan, section 14-3.8, it has the necessary findings for approval. And they do not involve design. There's three. One is that the Planning Commission is empowered to approve the plan under the section of Chapter 14 described in the application, which I don't think anyone's debating that part. B is that approving the development plan will not adversely affect the public interest. And C is that the use in any associated buildings are compatible with and adaptable to building structures and uses of the abutting property and other properties in the vicinity of the premises under consideration. So those are the criteria that are to be considered.
And that last criteria wouldn't qualify for us to be able to make a condition of this kind?
In my opinion, that would be a bit of a stretch because the use is pretty, I think no one is debating that is a acceptable
use issue.
So
a follow-up question, are we to assume that the code is written that if it's purposefully not in the code, it is purposefully excluded from the code?
No, we have criteria that we consider. And that is not a criteria that we consider. So to throw in a new criteria that is not appropriate to the applicant, when by code, it's not a criteria that we consider. But I have a question. I think your other question, Commissioner Faulkner, is a good one, is why wouldn't the developer consider an earth tone? Those buildings are pretty far apart. Phase 3 is in another corner. I think they'd probably get a good editorial in the New Mexican, and some maybe good letters to the editor if they'd consider an earth color. What is the opposition to that? Voluntarily do that.
Well, and what I'm trying to get to is we have to, so the community understands why we make some of the decisions we make. Is it sounds like in this case, we're interpreting the code with purposeful exclusion. So if it's not included in the code, it's by purpose that it is not, which then dictates that we can't consider it. And so that was the purpose of my first question, is to say, like, we would love to consider that, but it was purposeful exclusion, which means we don't have a choice in that decision making. So I'll close that question out, Madam Chair. But I would like to move on to the developer and say, why is this a non-negotiable? Because to me, it would seem like if I were the developer, I would want to work within a certain paradigm, if for nothing else, to appease people who might move into your community, to work well with the community that surrounds the development. So that's kind of, I would like to move on to the developer and ask that question. Why is it a non-negotiable?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Faulkner. So it really comes down to the consistency of having all three phases look the same. It's a gated community. It's the Cielo Village. That's the look they want to go for. It meets the city code. If you want to look at changing that in the future, by all means, but under the current rule book, it's the middle ground for developers and the public. We are in compliance with the code. And that's the reality of the situation. They're at 97% occupancy. People like this development and they want to live there. There's already a wait list for phase 2. So, I mean, we're just plain ball. We're meeting the code and we're doing what we have to do. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up comment?
Yes, Commissioner Faulkner.
I would offer to the developer that every apartment complex has people on the waiting list, because we have an underserved population for affordable apartments. These aren't even affordable, but people are so desperate for any kind of housing in the apartment category. So I wouldn't exactly say that because you have a waiting list that somehow legitimizes the decision to not stay within a certain paradigm of architecture.
Madam
Any other
Chair.
comments or question? Yes, Commissioner Morondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make two comments about what's been talked about so far. The first is, we keep having cases where affordability or not is talked about, and we often talk about the current rent or the current price. And what I'll continually bring up with this is part of that is that there's a shortage throughout every tier bracket of the rental and new construction and existing construction market. And what that means is if those apartments should be under normal market conditions, let's say $1,200, if a bunch of people that are in the market to spend more than that need to go there because of scarcity, it raises the prices. So if we always go back to the current market price as a reason not to do housing, we're going to stay here. So I'm not saying it means we should approve or not prove anything, but I just feel like I need to continually bring that perspective. The other point I'll raise, I don't often talk about design in these cases because I don't feel it is necessarily our role. Please trust that if I felt it was, you'd hear from me a lot. But the only thing I would like to add, and maybe Maggie or Jason would be even better to flesh out this point, the architectural point system as it impacts design it's pretty aggregate. So like the use and the zoning really come into play in terms of what you can or can't do. So part of that is where you are in the city and what kind of building you're building ends up impacting your options. And another really important thing I think to bring out about this point system, it is not possible really under the current point system to do a housing project that goes outside of the geometric and materiality constraints of that point system and go outside of color. You pretty much, once you go outside of color, you have to meet everything else. And so in that sense, I think it is working in that there is some constraint there. The other thing I'd caution about this whole conversation is I think there's a real expertise needed to require a project to fit into Santa Fe. It's simply not as simple as color or dimension. In fact, far more than color, sometimes material choices, even the specification of the stucco makes more of an impact. You could put out stucco that's paper thin, made out of plastic and slightly reflective, and it can be a color that's earth toned. But in reality, it simply has no representation of Santa Fe style. So these, to me, they're complex questions. And I do think there are some reasons why there's this line between the architectural review and permit and what would be approved in a development plan. Now, I guess what I'm suggesting is that if we want more control of these things, maybe we look at what that architectural review is during permit instead of trying to force it into this development plan, because it's really gonna, I think, make this process a lot more cumbersome. And you really only have to go to a historic board meeting to see what that might look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Those are good comments. Any other comments? Are we ready to proceed with a motion, a complicated motion?
Who's brave enough to take this on?
Commissioner Lawrence?
Go, Jesse.
Madam Chair, I will make a starting motion to approve the development plan amendment for case 2022-5899, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff, noting that regarding condition 18, that it requires that the request be made to NMDOT before recordation, but not the NMDOT decision, and the NMDOT pending decision will not prevent further permits or COs for this project.
Nice
Second.
job.
I second that.
Did we need to put anything in there about the fact that the applicant is not required under this condition to purchase the property or to pay an easement?
Madam Chair, I'd offer, I don't think we have the authority to do that because that's a decision that has to be made by NMDOT.
Chair Clow, if you can condition it that if NMDOT does require them to purchase an easement and is not able to donate it, that they not be required to do it, that is allowed.
Yes, so because I think that was sort of what we were representing to the applicant.
I will consider that a friendly amendment, Chair Clow.
I second that.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucero,
Yes.
Commissioner Morondo,
Yes.
Commissioner Pava.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move to staff communications.
Yes, thank you, Chair Clow. I just wanted to give an update from last night's governing body meeting, in case you didn't tune in. But it was definitely a love fest, I will say, and unanimously supported and approved by the governing body. So, and we received, yes, the Midtown Master Plan. I'm sorry, I forgot that little detail. And of course, yeah, when we're all a little tired from being up, for that last night, but there was a lot of public, that came out and spoke out in support of it, members of the community. And, there was a lot of good discussion from the council. And, we're all very happy to have that behind us. And Rich Brown, Director of Community Development, announced that the first 3 RFPs would be released tomorrow. So that is also very exciting. So there really is, movement on Midtown. Congratulations.
Anything else? Matters from the commission? Commissioner Pava?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to note that it's 8 o'clock and I'm still awake, even though jet lag has been an issue. In the last 2 days, I was watching the news and I fell asleep and it's like, what happened? That was yesterday. But more importantly, a little more seriously, I am delighted to learn that we have chosen Clarion and Associates to do the development code overhaul. They are fully capable of addressing just the kind of complex issues that we just dealt with here and resolve them so that maybe the city of Santa Fe can live up to its aspirations and being a unique place to live. maybe even with buildings that aren't all earth tone.
It's all a matter of opinion. Commissioner Smith and then Commissioner Lawrence. Commissioner Lucero.
I want to say amen to what Commissioner Pava said and also thank the staff for, the work they did to make sure that we had the whole picture on what the governing body received. This is a team victory.
Commissioner Lawrence. Lucero first. I'm tired too. I haven't been anywhere.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to kind of back to my first point. I want to express my interest in having all the materials to review. I was seeing things on the screens that I hadn't seen in my packet, and I think that would have really helped, and I think the developers said that it had been shown to previous commissions, but I would have liked to have seen some of those materials before this meeting. So I don't know how we require that or how we ask for that, but that's certainly something I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, thanks. Chair Clow and Commissioner Lucero. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, we can, I'll talk with the senior planners and, certainly in that instance where we had, previous cases, and then some period, a period of gap of time, and then coming back with new information or an amendment, but we can include, maybe just the whole case packet as it was presented prior, maybe an idea to make sure that we're, conveying all the renderings and all the information that was initially presented, so that new members who maybe weren't present for those hearings could at least have an opportunity to review that.
I think that'd be good.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
I think it's Commissioner Lawrence next.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, I just wanted to make a comment to my fellow commissioners about tonight's hearing that I really appreciated the discussion that we had about the architectural points. I think we all agreed that it's a really troublesome system, and it would be really nice to see some changes to make sure that we have consistency and positive design across the city. And I just really appreciated how that discussion came out and what everyone had to say in that regard.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
I was just going to suggest to what Ms. Moore just said, that maybe rather than giving us another 95 pages of documents that are 4 years old, there could be a synthesis, just some kind of, and then we could go into it. And I don't know if Seth would agree to that, but the notion that there's an enormous volume of minutes and findings, and it is mind-boggling if you're just an old man like me. But if there was some way to do a synthesis where if I saw something I wanted to know more about, I could ask, I think that might be a little more helpful. I don't know, just a thought.
Sounds like that could be a lot of work.
Oh, you think that's so the staff saves work and we get 4 hours of reading. So is that the way it works?
They're
Okay.
shaking their heads, yes.
That's how it works.
Okay, I got it. Just as I said, just a thought.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Lawrence.
Faulkner. I just want to update on the policy committee and what we're working on. We have been working on the ENN, possible changes to the ENN process. So the policy committee has promulgated some recommendations that we forwarded to staff. And at this point in the process, there's been some questions that the policy committee has had, and we feel like we can't move forward without staff's input. And so we have given staff our recommendations in kind of a straw man format. They're not our final recommendations, but they're the building blocks and foundation. and staff and the policy committee are going to meet to do a team kind of a think tank approach to the recommendations next Thursday. And so hopefully we'll be able to give counselors Worth and Cassett some options that they can use to generate some kind of a resolution or ordinance around ENNs. And so that's been our big push the last couple of months. And I think we've reached a point where we can really get into a good discussion with staff and approach it as a team to give the counselors something that they can really work with. And so that's been the policy committee's push. And I think we've hit a good place with it.
Thank you for that update. Any other matters from the commission? If not, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good.
I know we're after the meeting, but are we going to have another December meeting? Okay, thank you.